Okay. Can you see now the slide, the document?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's start. Today we're going to discuss Article 3 of the 1987 Constitution. It is all about the Bill of Rights. Okay. So when I say Bill of Rights, it is a charter of liberty, list of rights which the government will protect, and it cannot be violated by government or any public officer. So meaning it is an self-executing right which does not require any law for it to be enacted. Any violation thereof automatically a cause for a file to a case filed against a person violating that right. So it's a political right. What do you mean by political right? Right granted by law to member of the community in relation to their direct or indirect participation in the establishment. Okay? As distinguish it from a civil right, rights of every citizen of a country who are not connected with the organization of the government. Your claim against somebody is a civil right, but a claim against the government for a violation of the Bill of Rights is a political right. So these rights includes the word due process, which is stated in Article 3, Section 1. Very basic. Every now and then you will hear the word due process. What is in Section 1? No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall any person be denied the equal protection of the laws. I read it very slow for you to understand it, because this law is very important. Every now and then you will hear a case filed against somebody or even the government officer for violation of the what we call due process. A question may be asked, can a person be deprived of life, liberty, or property? Can a person be deprived of life, liberty, or property? The answer may be yes or no. But looking at the phrase of Section 1, no person shall be deprived of life. If a question is asked, can a person's life be taken? The answer is no. Okay? Because in Section 1 provides that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. But can that be taken, or can a life or liberty or property be deprived from a person? Yes, if there is due process of law. Okay? So what is due process then? The law which hears before it condemns, proceed upon inquiry, and render judgment only after trial. Memorize that. Okay? It will be asked later on in the test to define what is due process. It will not be asked in an identification, but it surely will be asked on definition. But it requires a specific and a definite answer, not just a widow or a bluff. There's no room here to bluff. We need a definite answer. Otherwise, it will give us a different meaning. So, would I expect you to memorize? Yes, particularly Article 3. Okay. There are aspects of due process. Okay, substantive, okay, procedural, and what is we even have criminal due process and administrative due process. What are those substantive due process? Requisite in interest of the public in general, as distinguished that from particular class, require the intervention of the state. We will not be talking much of a substantive due process because every now and then it is not used. What is used is the procedural due process. Okay, so there are four. What are these four procedural due process? Before a life, liberty, or property will be taken, these steps or four requisites must be complied with. What are those? One, impartial court or tribunal which hear or determines the matter before it. What do you mean by impartial? The court must not be biased. Or tribunal, a group or a body, we call it as a tribunal. It may not be a court because a regular court is presided by a judge, but there are tribunal which is not presided by a judge but may hear a certain case. It is called tribunal. A board is a tribunal which hears certain cases. Okay, dismissing a student or a faculty may not be done in court. It may be done in a tribunal. So meaning that the tribunal or court should not have any biases. And when can you say that the court or the tribunal does not have any biases? Well, basically, when there's no conflict of interest. That's one. Particularly in tribunal. I'm talking of tribunal. When is there impartial court? If the judge is not a relative within 6th civil degree by consanguinity or affinity. What does that mean? Of course, you know how to count first, second, third, or fourth. Your first cousin is your first civil degree. Where to get it? Okay, you cannot see me, but I'm sure you are good in imagination. From you as a son to your father, is one status. From your father to your great grandfather or grandfather, that's second. From your grandfather to your uncle, the brother of your father, third civil degree. From your uncle to his children, that's fourth civil degree, or that's what we call as your first cousin. Within that is fourth civil degree. Extending it in the same manner as I explained to 2 more degrees, that is sixth civil degree. The court who presides the case filed against you should first inhibit. The meaning of inhibit is he or she should not preside it, otherwise his decision is impartial or biased. He will, of course, decide in favor of his relatives within the 6th civil degree. Now, in any tribunal, if the board, for example, upon determining whether the student committed the offense, if one there's a conflict of interest, meaning he or she may be interested in the outcome of the case, then there is impartial tribunal. So what should you do? Move that a person, the one who presides or will determine the outcome of the case, should inhibit and will be replaced by somebody. Second, jurisdiction of the property acquired over the person of the defendant over the party in which the subject matter of the proceeding. Now, here, when you say jurisdiction acquired over the person, meaning there is a case filed against the person. Take note here, there are 2 things that you have to consider. Over the defendant and over the property. Can you see the highlight?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. When I say jurisdiction over the defendant, meaning a case is filed against him, can that be done by any other court? No. Only in the place where the crime is committed. Okay? No any other court can file a case against the person except the court which has jurisdiction of the crime. Meaning, if the crime is committed in Cebu City, only the court in Cebu City acquires jurisdiction over the person. Okay, because criminal offense is jurisdictional. Okay. Now, of course, which court will hear the case? There are two courts. If you notice in the later discussion, rather, there are kinds of, as early as now, you should know that there are municipal trial court if the case filed against or if the crime committed is triable or the penalty imposed is less than 6 years, it's municipal trial court, and higher than that, it's regional trial court. So that court may acquire jurisdiction over the person depending on the crime committed. Now, on the over the property, if the case is all about a property or the subject matter of the case is ownership of the land, then it will be the court which has jurisdiction over the property, meaning the court where the property is situated. Okay. Now, the third is defendant must be given an opportunity to be heard, meaning there must be trial. Okay. First, in the procedure, the defendant will receive a complaint. The defendant will answer it with his lawyer. After that, there will be, what's the next? They are going to meet face to face. That is called arraignment. It is mandatory. A person who is accused during the arraignment must face personally the accuser. And it is when the time the court will ask the person accused to plead, okay, guilty or not guilty. If he pleads guilty, then there's no more trial, but a judgment shall be rendered. If he pleads not guilty, then trial may proceed. After that, the defendant may not join or may be done through trial in absentia, meaning there is a trial even without the appearance now of the accused. Only the lawyer may be present. After trial, rebuttal, presentation of evidence, then there will be judgment. The judgment is rendered whether a person is guilty or not guilty. Should this require the presence of the defendant? Now, yes, this requires the presence of the defendant. If the person is not around and a judgment is rendered, meaning the person waived his right to appeal. Meaning, there will be further judgment. There's no more right to appeal. Loses his right. Person loses the right to appeal. Now, so those are the important thing or event when a person's presence is required. Now, others are similar to that, but the first one, the one I discussed, is the very important part. That also applies to all. It's not only in criminal cases, applies to even administrative, like students, that requires still due process. In other words, when you say due process, strike me but hear me first. Render judgment but listen first. Strike me but hear me first. I may be guilty but first listen. This is my explanation. That's the meaning of due process. Now, the last line of section 1, nor shall any person be denied of the equal protection of the laws. The law protects all. Okay? If you will be denied, you must there must be some valid reason why the law denies protection. What are those? Okay, here. For a law punishing or didn't give any protection to an individual, there must be a reason. One of that is there such a classification rests upon a substantial distinction. Okay, so if one is favored by the law, there must be valid reason. Okay, and the not protecting an individual the law must be genuine or germane purpose. The law must be created for a germane purpose, meaning it is intended for a valid cause. Okay, and it is not confined to an existing condition. Okay, the law must not only be existing at this particular time, it must be particular or applicable to all at all times. And the last, it applies equally to all members of the same class. So let you understand the broad concept of that phrase. For example, I'm going to give 1,000 to each to every class, class B and class A. That 1,000 is, of course, that is equal, right? But it may not be equitable. Why? Because other class may have different number, maybe few in your class than your class, right? Meaning that each of you will receive higher than each of them receive. What does that mean? Okay, when you make a law favoring certain class, that is not germane because that violates number 4. It applies equally to all members of the same class. Okay? So meaning if a person will be deprived because of the law passed, then the law violates section 1. Okay? Particularly the last clause. Nor a person be deprived of the equal protection of the law. Another example is, there are policy which benefits groups, like a portion of a cemetery given to beggars. Would that violate that provision? It's generally intended for public purpose. But is it valid? We're talking here of a valid classification as found in section 1, last paragraph. Okay, those are the things that you have to consider. The basis, of course, this one. Such classification rests upon substantial distinction. Okay, that the distinction must be very definite. And the purpose of the law must be germane. It's not intended to defeat an opponent in politics. And number 3, not confined only in existing condition, and the last applies to all members of the same class. We go to section 2. It's very important. I'm going to read and you have to memorize along the way. The right of the people to be secured in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizure of whatever nature for any purpose as shall be inviolable. And no search warrant or warrant of arrest shall be issued except upon probable cause to be determined personally by the judge after examination under oath or affirmation of the complainant and the witnesses he may produce, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. The definition of search warrant is actually found in section 2. Okay? Now, there are two things here. There are two warrants mentioned in section 2. Check your speaker because that may be recorded. This is recorded. The sound may be recorded as well. I might unmute all of you. Okay. So every now and then you check your speaker. By the way, I have to start from here.